Hi, everyone. My name is Professor Tanya Hertz, and you are in the penultimate chapter of Business 100, which is Chapter 15. Yes, Chapter 15. We'll be covering human resource management in Chapter 15, which is a chapter I love. Again, it's a surface level introduction to human resource management. You could take 1, 3, 5 courses in human resource management. You could major in it. You could get a PhD in HR management. And I teach many classes in human resource management, but we'll approach this from a foundational perspective. Okay, so let's start by looking at our PowerPoint notes. If you need to use the closed caption feature, click on the little CC at the bottom of the screen. And human resource management is so important in an organization. It's vital to understand the importance of human resource management and the basics of human resource management, because for most organizations, it's very difficult to sort of find a way to access and to protect our competitive advantage. So remember, a competitive advantage is something that we as a company do better than the competition. Well, it's easy to see, okay, well, competitive advantage could be anything that we do a little bit different and better. But what's something that we can do different and better and keep that advantage over the competition? We call that sustainable competitive advantage. Well, that's harder to get. That, for most companies, comes from our human resources, the people in our organization. And so if we want to do the best that we can do, if we want a source of sustainable competitive advantage, if we want to make a lot of money, if we want to keep our employees happy, avoid turnover, we have to focus on the human resources in the organization. And as a manager, I don't care what field you're in, you need to know the basics of human resource management so that you do it right, so that you understand the importance of it, and so that you don't get your organization in trouble by violating some of the many laws associated with the human resource management. And beyond that, I wanted to say one thing. As a manager, a line manager, a mid-level, whatever your managerial capacity is in the company, chances are you will be involved in some of the recruiting and the selection, some of the performance management. All of those kinds of things are HR functions. And the more that you know about human resource management, the better you will be in management in general and in business. Some of the challenges that we face as a human resource management company, human resource manager in the company, includes things like laying off our employees. Outsourcing has a big impact on the way that we do business. It's really a difficult task to build a top quality workforce and to not only build it, but to protect and maintain it. And there's not one strategy that we use to achieve this task, but there are many ways that we can use our human resources to help us to succeed in an organization. And there are a lot of different approaches that we can take to accomplish the strategy of being a forward-thinking company with a top quality workforce. So some other tasks that we might face are handling discrimination in the organization, offering especially our younger employees, the millennials, the post-millennials, a good work-life balance, avoiding lawsuits and encouraging legal practices in our organization, managing the retirement. And why do you think retirement is such a key consideration in today's workforce? Well, we talked about this, remember, way back in the generational cohorts chapter, is a lot of workers are staying around longer. They're working longer than they used to work. And they're doing that not necessarily because they want to. A lot of them have to. And so we have higher costs of healthcare. And we, at the same time, we want to bring in new employees. We want to bring in new employees with fresh ideas and fresh insights. But a lot of these new employees, they come in with a little bit of an entitled attitude. And I know we talked about it in cohort, when we talked about cohorts before, it's not because of anything that's necessarily wrong with them. They just don't get it, a lot of them. They haven't worked a lot before, and they're used to receiving praise for things that they didn't deserve. And they come into the company thinking that they should just get everything without working for it. And it's a lot of work as an HR manager or manager in general. All right. So one of the major sources of problems faced by HR managers is that they lack sufficient strategic skills. And because of this, employees often perceive their HR manager as the enemy. Beyond that, a lot of HR managers think that their responsibility is to protect the interests of the organization. And that's true, but it's not at the expense of the interests of the employees. These goals should be aligned. Everybody should be working towards the same thing. And so an effective HR manager will make the employee feel valued, make the employee feel like their interests are aligned with the interests of the organization, because they should be, right? The HR department is not the enemy of the employee. Let's take a little pause right here. Just quickly. I'm back, sorry about that. So let's go back to our PowerPoint slides, and let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we do in terms of planning in the HR department. So part of what we do is we evaluate the current workforce. We, as HR managers, if those of you who go into HR management, but as managers as well, will have to do this, is job analysis. So job analysis is often overlooked as part of what the HR department does. Job analysis is so important, though. It really, I've heard it referred to as the cornerstone of everything that HR does. And job analysis is essentially looking at the specific tasks that every employee does on any given day. So let's say that an employee's job is, a food server. As a human resource manager, through job analysis, you look at every single task associated with food service. Now you think, well, why do we do this? Well, we do this for many different reasons. We do this so that when we do our performance evaluations in our company, that those performance evaluations are based on fair metrics, on measurable metrics. We do this so that we can write our job descriptions and our job specifications, so that when we hire people, we're hiring people with the right knowledge, skills, and abilities for the particular job. We do this for many, 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 many different things. In fact, almost everything you do in HR management can be tied to job analysis. So one of the primary things we do is we use these analyses to write job descriptions and job specifications. So job descriptions, specifications, you've seen them. They are they tell you about what the job entails. So a job description, you'll often see this. When we're advertising a job sometimes, or you'll see it in the employee manual. Employees are given this when they're first hired, and a job description often includes what we call the TDRs, the tasks, duties, and responsibilities of any given job. Or any, I say job position, right? The job specification is very similar but different, because where the job description focuses on the position, the job specification focuses on the person who has the job, right? The person who holds the position, and their knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics that are required in order to complete that job successfully. We call job description TDRs, tasks, duties, responsibilities, job specifications, KSAOs, knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics that are required for a particular job. And all of this is part of the planning process in HR management. And the strategic planning process typically covers the main aspects of human resource management, and there are many different functions in human resource management. As human resource management, we're involved with recruitment. Recruitment is different than selection. Do I go through these? I think I go through them. Yes, I'll go through them one by one, moving on. Starting with recruitment. Recruitment is different than selection. Recruitment is getting people excited to work for our company, right? Selection is then getting all those people who are excited and actually figuring out which ones have what it takes to do the job. So we can recruit internally or externally in an organization. And typically we'll recruit, most companies start with internal recruitment. And why do you think that is? Internal recruitment is hiring people who already have another position in the company, right? So let's say we're hiring somebody for a food server position. Maybe we'll look at our current bussers or the hosts and hostess for the company, right? Before we hire outside. That's internal recruitment. Why do we do that? Why do we do that? Well, typically that's cheaper. We already know about the employee. We know about whether or not he or she has the right attitude, the right all those soft skills that are important in any given job. Or soft skills are also known as people skills. They're the the right personality. They have the right attitude. They have the right abilities. Whether or not they have the technical skills, we can train them, right? If we can't find the right person in internal recruitment, we'll look outside the company, external recruitment, and we'll put some sort of advertisement out there, or we'll use one of the main recruitment sites, go to Indeed, any of the others to recruit. But the number one external recruitment source, a lot of people don't realize this, is actually is very related to internal recruitment, because it's recruiting people who already know somebody who works in the organization. We really quickly, give me just a second. Grab. Thank you. Sorry, I had to step away for a second there. I had somebody at the door. Let's go back here. Okay, so we were in recruiting. We were talking about internal, external. I think we were talking about, number one external recruiting source is actually related to internal recruiting. It's referrals. It's getting people who one of our employees in the organization knows someone, and then we actually go out and say, well, you already know this person, so you know a little bit about them, you know how they behave, you know how they act. Let's give them the first shot for the job. It's actually the number one external recruiting source, referrals. And there's problems associated with this. I don't want to get too much into detail, but I just want to say that be careful with referrals. While they are inexpensive and they do give us a little bit of an insight into the way that the person behaves because they know somebody in the company, there's also the problem of creating a workforce that's very homogenous, where everybody looks like everybody else, where there's a little bit, there could be some bias, there could be some nepotism in the organization. So be careful with that. All right, moving on. Selection is different than recruiting. Like I said, recruiting is getting people excited to work for the company. Selection is actually whittling down all of those candidates and choosing the most qualified candidates, the ones who have the right KSAOs. It's important when we're choosing the selectric metric, we're choosing one which is fair, which is free from bias, and which tells us if the person possesses those KSAOs. Not necessarily if we like the person. That's irrelevant. I've heard so many companies say, oh, we're hiring based on fit. Fit can be problematic, because oftentimes when people say fit, what they really mean is, I want to hire somebody who looks like me, who acts like me, who thinks like me. Be careful. Again, it's a good idea to use at least a mostly structured interview process. It doesn't have to be entirely structured. There can be a little bit of flexibility in there. But a structured interview is when we have the interview set up in such a way where the interviewer must ask certain questions. That way we can make sure that when we're evaluating the candidates, we're doing it fairly. We're doing candidate to candidate to candidate based on the same questions, rather than one person we ask one thing, one person we ask another in an unstructured setting. But better than an interview, much, much, much more fair, much less subject to personal bias or to any sort of subjectivity, is testing. Testing is the best way to hire an employee, the best metric that we can use. Testing is fair. It's impartial. It gives us the best chance of actually hiring a worker who's right for the particular position. And the kinds of tests we can use, every organization does a different test, but the best predictors of future job performance, cognitive ability, so how smart a person is, and also personality. So the two that I recommend are the Wonderlic test and the for cognitive ability, and for personality, the Big Five is the best indicator that gives us a good idea of how well somebody will perform. It's also important to check references, to conduct background checks. This is typically done late in the process. The reason it's done late in the process is because it's expensive. And then we can design the appropriate job offer based on that. Hiring, and we can choose the different kinds of workers that we hire. We can choose full-time workers. We can choose, salaried workers, hourly workers, but we can also choose to hire workers through the gig economy. We call it the gig economy, which essentially means that they don't really work for our company, but they're independent contractors, right? They don't have a regular full-time job with us, but they're either temporary workers, independent workers. There's some kind of worker who doesn't fit the traditional bill. It's a good idea to do this when the job that we're hiring them for is temporary in nature, or maybe rapidly changing, or we don't know how long it's going to last. But it's a bad idea to hire people from that gig economy or contingent workers anytime we're having them work on proprietary information, so something like a trade secret, or really tightly held information that we don't want to share in the company. So those kind of decisions need to be made before we decide who to hire. It's also the responsibility of the HR department to conduct orientation and on-the-job training. Orientation typically, so orientation is, for most companies in the United States, is less than 3 days. It's usually about 2 days, 1.5 to 2 days, where we introduce people to the company. We let them know what to expect. And then if we didn't do a good job in the entire recruitment process, letting them know what the company was all about, then at that point, it's better to lose them early if we lose them at all. The majority of training is not in orientation. It's not presentation method. It's hands-on training. It's on-the-job training. It's actually getting them there and doing that. About 90% of the training, 90% of the training in most organizations is on-the-job training. We can choose to do apprenticeships or internships. And I think, do I have a slide? No, I don't have an internship slide. Let's see. No. But apprenticeships are a little bit different than internships in that apprenticeships typically are more blue-collar type work. It's there's typically a combination of classroom training and on-the-job training through apprenticeships. We also have something called off-the-job training, which is essentially training in which we ask our employees to. So it's very similar to orientation, where we ask them to do more classroom type training, or these are also called presentation method type trainings away from the job. We ask them to step away from their regular tasks, duties, and responsibilities in order to learn more. It's so important, right? This is development. This is giving employees the tools that they need to be more successful. This is showing our employees that we care about them, showing that their growth, moving up, is important to us. It's important that we don't just do this for our non-management employees, but our employees as well. Now, typically, the HR department is involved with the evaluation process, including performance evaluations. Again, needs to be free from bias, needs to be not subjective, totally objective. It needs to be based on what we learned in that job description, all of the tasks and duties that employees do on a regular basis, and then we evaluate them fairly, is the way that it should be. It's often done one-on-one between managers and subordinates. It's important, though, that HR has a role in that, so that the process is fair, so that the managers have the right evaluation tools, so that they can see if the employees are meeting the objectives, and they can help with the actual appraisal process, and they can make sure that, as HR, that we train the managers so that the managers are being objective, so they're giving the appropriate feedback, so that they're helping our employees to grow and to be satisfied and to be happy employees. We also, as HR managers typically are responsible for setting the compensation rates. And the most common compensation systems here in the United States are wages and salaries. In addition, many organizations will link some amount of worker pay directly to performance. Employees typically like this. It motivate employees to excel. It's important when we're setting our compensation or our pay that it's fair, again, and it's fair not just within the organization, but from organization to organization. Because as an employee, do you know how much your colleagues make? Do you know how much other people make in different companies? Well, a lot of us nowadays, we have access to this information. The internet exists, right? We look it up. And so we need to make sure that our compensation systems are fair so that we keep our employees happy, so that they want to work for our company. Right? Also, employers will often, even though it's not required by law, offer some sort of non-compensation benefits, such as health insurance, which, again, in other classes, we'll go way more into detail on this, but is only required for certain sized companies. Vacation time is never required. Childcare is never required by law. Sick time, even here in California, we do have a little bit of sick time that's required, paid sick time, but paid sick time is federally not a required benefit. Paid vacation, not a required benefit. So why do so many companies give these benefits? Why do we provide our employees with these benefits? Well, it's so that we can show our employees that we care about them, that their satisfaction matters, that their emotional and psychological well-being matters to us. So that we keep our employees satisfied and productive and doing what they should be doing rather than burning out and being unhappy employees. One thing I wanted to say about flex time, more and more organizations are moving away from the traditional 5-day work week. 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week is going away. A lot of people are giving their employees flex time because they want it, because then they can choose how they get the work done. As long as they're getting the work done, why does it matter to us? Flex time is good for the employee, it's good for the employer. So flex time is allowing the employee to choose to work. They can choose their time, they can choose to work away from home, they can choose many different things. Or many different, usually we'll give them sort of a window, and then they can choose the time. But it really allows the employees to do what they need to do in their personal life to have that work-life balance and keep them happy. We're also moving away, again, I said, from the traditional work week to a more compressed work week, 4/10s instead of 5/8s. The thing, though, with 4/10s, 4 days a week for 10 hours a day, you have to watch what type of employee they are, because here, especially in the state of California, we have a daily overtime. We don't just have a weekly overtime. Federally, there's a weekly overtime. So the federal overtime says if you work more than 40 hours a week, we have to pay time and a half. Here in California, we have to pay time and a half if you work more than 8 hours a day. So we need to make sure that that's not happening, that the employees are non-exempt if we are giving them that compressed work week. We allow a lot of employees now to telecommute, to work away from the office. Oh, employees love this. It gives them that work-life balance, right? Because of technology, we're able to let them work away. Benefits them, benefits us. It's wonderful. Costs us less money when less employees are working physically in our office. Less lights, less location, less brick and mortar expenses, and it makes the employees happy. And it's also important to note, if we're able to allow the employees to job share, that's a great thing too, when they share 2 full-time jobs as one. A little bit about separation. It's typically the responsibility of the HR department. Separation, by separation, you know what we mean, right? Firing people. We need to make sure that we're really careful when we're terminating employees. Number one, to avoid litigation, wrongful termination lawsuits. But number two, you need to be careful, because here in the United States, there's a real problem with employee violence. And there are, every single year, there are workplace homicides here in the United States, wherein workers will come back to their place of employment after they're fired, and they will usually more than 80% of the time use a firearm to shoot and kill people in the company. So it's so important that we handle separation carefully, pragmatically, and in such a way that is respectful of the employee. And we can, there's a number of different reasons why we have to let people go, but no matter how we let them go, it's important that we do it right. There are some federal laws that affect the way that we can do business in the United States, particularly in HRM, including Title VII, which is also called the Civil Rights Act. So Title VII prohibits discrimination in hiring, firing, compensation, apprenticeship, training, terms, condition, or privileges of employment based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, and that's it. So did I say disability? No. Did I say age? No. Did I say sexual orientation? No. So does that mean that we can discriminate based on religion? Well, that's in there, I'm sorry. Sexual orientation? Or can we discriminate based on age? Well, no, there are other laws there to protect. One thing I do want to say about the sexual orientation or gender identity, there is not a federal law that expressly prohibits gender discrimination or sexual identity discrimination. However, it's not just the laws, it's also the way that the laws are interpreted by our courts that matter. And more, we're starting to see federally that laws are starting to use Title VII as a way to protect people. And they're using the, sorry about that. They're using the sex portion to include meaning, sexual orientation or gender identity. So that's that. And then also state by state, there are now 18 states that have laws in the books that do protect against that kind of discrimination. Age is protected by the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, ADEA. Protection Against Disability is another act. It's the Americans with Disabilities Act. So there are other acts out there that protect people against discrimination. And so we cannot discriminate based on these things. So when we're making decisions about hiring an employee, we can't say, no, I don't like that person because I really wanted a man for this job. You can't say this, right? That's a violation of Title VII. And who oversees this? Well, when Title VII was enacted in 1964, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission was developed at the same time. And that's the agency that was designed or created as part of that same act to enforce the provision. So let's say that you, as an employee, are being treated unfairly. Let's say that your employer just told you, hey, you know what, Ben? I really, really wanted to give you the manager's job, but, we really didn't want to give that to somebody who was your race. We really kind of thought it would go better. It would look better if we gave the same job to somebody who was a Black woman. Who would you call and say, hey, this isn't fair? Well, first you'd call your HR department. If they didn't do what they should do, you would call the EEOC. The EEOC is there to protect us, right? To make sure that companies don't use these unfair, illegal discriminatory methods when they're hiring, firing, or giving pay, et cetera, et cetera. There are other acts. There are so many other acts that affect HR management that go beyond Title VII, including like I said, the ADA. There's the Family Medical Leave Act, OSHA, the Immigration Reform Act, Equal Pay Act. There's the Pregnancy Discrimination Act. There are many other acts that affect legal HR. And if you get into HR management, you'll learn about them one by one, but these are some of the big ones. Finally, I just wanted to touch quickly about affirmative action. Affirmative action has a bad rap, I think, because people think that it's a quota system, that affirmative action is there to say, hey, if I'm hiring 100 people, then we need to make sure that 50 of those people are women. We need to make sure that 30 of those people are Black, that 20 of those people are whatever other minority category. And that's not the way that affirmative action works. Affirmative action is there to increase employment opportunities and educational opportunities for any of those minority or protected groups. It's not a systematic quota system. It's there, it's designed to make up for this kind of internal systematic discrimination that's been inherent, just built into our systems from the past. But it doesn't work the way that you think it would work. Affirmative action says, if I'm hiring people, that I need to make sure that I'm reaching out to all of these groups, that I'm making opportunities available to all these groups. Let's say that I have a company, I'm hiring 100 people. And when I'm hiring these 100 people, I realize that, when I'm choosing the candidates, that I chose 90 men and only 10 women. That would cause me not to say, oh, I need to give jobs to less qualified women. No, if I had a good affirmative action plan in place, it would cause us to say, are we reaching out not in our selection metrics, but in our recruitment metrics to reach those women, to reach the minority groups so that they know about the job, so that they apply, so that we get a good pool of candidates who have the right qualifications. And then in the selection process, affirmative action has no business. Affirmative action doesn't get involved with the selection process. It's the recruitment process, right? So then in that recruitment process, we then say, we're reaching all of the women and the minorities and all the other protected groups so that they apply for the job. So instead of saying, let's hire less qualified women, even though we have qualified men who applied for the job, no, we go back to the process and we say, let's see, where do women find out about jobs? Is it women's magazines? Is it women's whatever? And that's where we reach out to them. So, okay, that's that about affirmative action. I just want to make sure that it's clear because a lot of people don't understand it and that's why they don't like it. And I get why they don't like it, because they think it's a quota system, but it's not. Finally, sexual harassment is something that all HR managers need to make sure that they're protecting their workers against, because it's the employer's responsibility to make sure that everybody works in an environment that's free from hostile sexual advances, that's free from quid pro quo harassment. Quid pro quo means this for that in Latin, essentially means somebody getting a promise of a job or a promotion if they do some sort of sexual favor or something like this. That's illegal, right? It's also a sexual, it could be, like I said, a hostile work environment, making inappropriate jokes, inappropriate touching. All of these things are illegal. And it's the responsibility of the company to make sure that people know what's expected of them, what's legal, what's illegal, and doesn't tolerate sexual harassment in any way, because it's not right? And if any of you are experiencing these kinds of things and want advice, I'm happy to help. In any kind of discrimination or sexual harassment, I cannot stand it in my, it's illegal, but beyond that, it's disgusting and it shouldn't go on anymore. So if you need any advice or anything, I'm happy to help. I'm here. That's what I'm here for. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this chapter. HR is a great thing to study. In fact, if you're looking for a job right now and you want to stay in San Diego and you like management, but you don't know where to focus your interest, just consider HRM. Look up how much HR managers are getting paid. On an entry-level job right now, you can be making $60,000, $70,000 a year here in San Diego if you get your bachelor's degree in human resource management. So consider it. There's a lot of jobs out there, and it's a fun job if you like working with people and you're smart and you don't mind keeping up on laws. All right, I'll see you in the next chapter. Take care.